Today we'll get down more to the nitty-gritty of marriage and the nitty-gritty of what kind of problems arise and how they might be dealt with. As I mentioned last week also, there are questions and there are problems. Questions can be answered. Problems need to be solved. I don't know if this is the place for problem solving, but We'll see what questions are presented. Just to review the one point from last week that will bring us to here, that marriage is more than just a partnership, it's a merger of two people, where the two people become one, philosophically, mystically. The two souls of the couple were originally one. They took two different paths on their way down. For 20 or 30 years they were two separate entities, and when they get married they become one again. From another perspective, the Gemara says that though the marriage is a marriage of two people, it is a marriage of three, because the third partner in the marriage is Hashem, and with the recognition that there is more to the marriage than just the interests of the two parties, there could be the ultimate union, and that gives them the ability to overcome challenges. In Chassidus, it talks about the difference between bittul hayesh and bittul b'metzius. Bittul hayesh means the nullification of the ego, that a person on his own realizes that ego is no good, so he nullifies his ego. And as long as it is he who is nullifying his ego always remains. It may be a trace of the ego, but the driving force to nullify the ego is the person himself. You can't undo the driving force. Bittul b'metzius is the recognition that there is something greater than you, and you submit to that greater thing. You're carried away by that greater thing. That can achieve total nullification. It is in the interest of the two partners in the marriage to cooperate, to work together, to make it harmonious. But as long as it is in their interest, their self-interest always is first. There's always a looking out for number one. When there's a realization, no, I am not driven by what is good for me and therefore for us. I am driven by what does God want from me and from us, and if you can make that primary, it makes it a lot easier to overcome challenges, because it's not me and it's not you. We together are working to submit to the will of Hashem, and the vehicle for the best kind of living is a married kind of living, living with a family where we are governed by Hashem's guidance in the Shulchan Aruch, in what we do and in how we feel and in how we think. That's how a Jew is supposed to be. Okay. And I mentioned also the man is the mashpia and the woman is the makabel. The man has the leadership role, the woman is the receiver. That's how it is Kabbalistically, that's how it is halachically. That doesn't mean the man is the boss. It means the man is his job is to take the lead and bring about consensus from his wife so she's on board with the direction that the family is going. And if he doesn't achieve consensus, he just has to work a little bit harder until he achieves that. Borrowing a point from the recent news, POTUS, you know POTUS? The President of the United States, that's right. Our President had a State of the Union address in the last week or so, and he said, I don't get along with the Congress, and I'm the president, I can do what I want. I will legislate what I want. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. Whether he's allowed to do it, whether he'll get away with it, I'll leave for greater scholars than me. But as a citizen, and one who tends to be more on the conservative side, and some of you may share my feelings, it doesn't feel good to be told, I am the boss and you're going to do it my way whether you like it or not. It is disenfranchising, what's the word I'm looking for? Disfranchising. It's disfranchising of the individual and of the country and of the legislature. And it doesn't feel good, and either you go along reluctantly or kicking and screaming, or you do whatever you can to block that attitude. In a marriage, even if the husband is the president of the United States, he needs his wife's consensus so that she will go along with what he thinks is right, willingly, happily, enthusiastically, because he realizes this is in the best interest of what the family's values are and what's best for both of them. One can only speak in generalities when you're talking about marriage and shalom bayis, because somewhere in the background you have to say something like, all things being equal. The husband is normal, and the wife is normal, the husband's values are balanced, the wife's values are balanced, the husband's temperament is balanced, the wife's temperament is balanced, and I can go on and on in where life and individuals need to be balanced. Then whatever I'm going to say is going to work. But if you modify that it's not totally balanced, and people are temperamental, and people are moody, and people are, the list goes on and on, it won't work exactly as it says in the manufacturer's handbook, because you'll have to make adjustments for the role of each individual. That is often the source of problems. If one partner is very depressed, a lot of what I might say is not going to work. If one partner is very egotistical, do it my way, well, that goes against the very principles that I'm trying to present. The husband, this is a men's class, the husband must constantly be cognizant not to let his natural ego, which he needs. A man needs an ego to motivate him to achieve. So ego is good when it's harnessed. If you don't have an ego, it's a problem. If your ego is unharnessed, it is also a problem. So you need to accept the fact that you have an ego. Don't kill it, but you always need to be conscious of it and be aware that you need to harness it in relation to your spouse, in relationship to your friends. If you want to have friends, harness your ego. How to Win Friends and Influence People, that was a pretty good book a long time ago, and it's still probably a pretty good book, and it still probably sells many thousands of copies every month. And the theme is, if you want to win friends and influence people, be interested in them. Don't fake that you're interested in them, but you're really out for yourself. Be interested in them and bring them on board to share your vision, and you will be successful. Okay. So let me give you 3 Jewish sources, because I'm not a marriage, as I said last week, I'm not a marriage counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a regular guy. So, I'm going to give you 3 Jewish sources to chew on for the next 50 years. In the Tnoim, that's the informal marriage agreement which takes place when you get engaged, call it a vort. We write that in the olden times they used to have the Tnoim a year earlier. Today we write the Tnoim at the time just before the chuppah, at the Kabbalas Panim. But the text is an ancient one and a relevant one up to today. It talks about the couple. Va'al yavrichu, va'al ya'alimu, loy zeh mizoy, v'loy zoy mizeh, v'yaduru, v'neim ba'ava v'chiba ka'erach kolar. Al yavrichu, yavrichu is an interesting word. It means to squirrel away money. Women call it a knippel. You know, take a little bit of my money, I'm putting it aside for a rainy day for myself. Husband can do that too. He can have a private Swiss account. The Tanaim says you're not allowed to do that. Do not set aside money as your own that is not shared with your spouse. Va'al yalimu, do not conceal. It has to be an open relationship without secrets. Neither him from her, nor her from him. V'yaduru b'neim ba'ava v'chiba, and they should live amongst themselves with love and how would you translate chiba? Affection, yeah, that would be the right word. As is the behavior of the world. Now, if it means today's world, we're asking for trouble. I guess the world that they were talking about was the Jewish world that actually lived with each other, husbands and wives lived with each other in a good, loving, pleasant way. Next thought. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, and some of you may have had this question. I had this question for many years. It says, "Al tarbe sicha im ho'isha." Do not engage in excessive sicha with the woman. And then the Mishnah explains that's talking about your own wife. How much more so with someone else's wife? The Mishnah is saying, don't speak with your wife too much. That's what it seems to be saying. The feminists would have a problem with that, but I also had a problem with that. I mean, it's your wife. Speak with her. Isn't that a good thing? So Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has a very interesting interpretation there. He says the word in Hebrew, there are 10 words that mean speaking. The most known ones are Dibur, Amira, Haggadah, and Sicha. Those are the 4 better known ones, but there's another 6 which are different nuances of communication. Dibur and Amira we all know from Kaisemer Leveshaka Vesayil of Bnei Yisrael. The women have to be spoken Amira, softly, and the men can be spoken to with Sagi, harshly, Dvarim Akashim Kigidin. Men have to be spoken to black and white, women have to be spoken to gently. What does Sicha mean? It also means speaking. The Rebbe used to speak Sichas, Lekutei Sichas. Sicha is, respecting the word Lekutei Sichas, Sicha is used in the context of Sichas Chulin, common speaking. Sichas Yelodim, the speaking of children, is used the word Sicha. Sicha is light talk. as opposed to dibur and amira, which is heavy or weighty talk. And the Rebbe's siches are called siches in comparison to Maimorim, which are very intense and very deep. Sicha is more conversational. Rabbi Gershon Schusterman Hirsch interprets this Mishnah: don't use your wife for shallow talk, but the serious conversations you will reserve for your other men cronies. That is disrespecting your wife. Do not engage in excessive sicha, rather spend more time with her in amira and haggadah and learning, which are all forms of speaking. Don't think of your wife only as one for shallow conversations. 30, 40 years ago, they used to have country clubs. Men would bring their wives, and they would have dinner together with their friends, and then the men would go to the smoking room where they would talk business, and the women were sent someplace else to talk about insignificant stuff. That was the standard. This was the program for the evening. First we'll have just dinner together, the men will then talk business, and the women will waste their time together as women do. That concept, that outline, is antithetical to Judaism and antithetical to Jewish marriage. A Jewish marriage is where you speak to your wife serious stuff, not just sicha, not just shallow stuff. And the third thing is from one of the brachas of the Sheva brachas: samach tisamach reim ha'ahuvim. We're asking of Hashem in the Sheva brachas, gladden the chassan and kala as reim ha'ahuvim. Reim means friends, ha'ahuvim, who are in love. In a nice, dignified, refined, tznius, and holy way. You need to really care for your spouse and really be called friends. Friends, what are friends do? Think of men friends. They share laughs. They consult each other. In a marriage, you laugh, you share goals, you share aspirations, you share plans, you consult, and every once in a while you also criticize. We'll get into the criticism soon. And one thing that people do, even husbands and wives, and there are letters from the Rebbe to that effect, they learn together. They learn Torah together. Whether it's Chumash, if that's their level, or whether it's a Sicha or a Maimer, if that's their level, whether it's a Din and Shulchan Aruch or something on the Parsha of the week. It bonds them in a mature and responsible and Jewish way, like nothing else. Even if it's only half an hour a week, 2 times 15 minutes, or 1 time a half an hour, it is something that really works to create a mature and respectful relationship between the husband and wife. I want to talk about love. Love is such a powerful word, and it's bandied around in so many ways and often loses its refinement and loses its meaning. Let me talk for a moment about love from a Torah perspective and love from a Hasidic perspective. The Torah gives us a commandment: Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. What does it mean to love one's fellow as oneself? On a superficial level, it means, as Hillel said to the prospective convert, that which you despise, do not do unto others. It's easy to define love your fellow as yourself in behavioral things, action, And it's even easier and clearer when it is described as do not, that which you despise, do not do unto others. And there's a reason why Hill said it in a negative way rather than in a positive way. He could have said, do unto others as you want done unto you. But specifically, he said it in a negative way. But the ahavta means more than just doing, it means feeling. So the key to understanding the feeling of the ahavta l'reacha, love your fellow, and by the way, the ultimate fellow, I don't know if the word fellow in English is a masculine word, but the ultimate fellowship that a person has in life is one's spouse. There's a pasuk in Mishlei about a woman, ki hi chavrusecha ve'eshes brisecha. I mentioned it last week. She is your friend and the woman of your covenant. It's the deepest friend that one can have. And the Torah says, how do you love your spouse? Kamoicha, as you love yourself. If one were to ask oneself, do I love myself? You would get a little bit stuck. What does it mean, do I love myself? I am myself. What does it mean, do I love myself? I mean, I certainly don't hate myself unless I'm in therapy. But if I'm basically normal, I don't not love I have difficulty with defining I love myself. So there's a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek in Derech Mitzosecha on the mitzvah of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which the Tzemach Tzedek makes it very clear and very down to earth. Loving oneself means a absolute and unequivocal and total acceptance of oneself. No one knows our own flaws as well as we know ourselves. Sometimes we hope nobody else knows them. They usually figure it out, but at least you can dream that they don't know. But you yourself know your flaws. Now, what happens if you know your flaws? Do you accept yourself less? You may respect yourself less, but you don't accept yourself any less. Why? It's me. It's all I got. That's who I am. I accept myself totally, flaws and all. I have qualities, I have flaws. I'm hopefully working on them, but acceptance, the underlying sense of love it starts with a foundation of acceptance. Which means that notwithstanding the obvious flaws that you see, do not diminish the acceptance. It may need to be fixed, but it doesn't diminish the acceptance. The commandment of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha is accept your fellow as yourself, flaws and all, but total acceptance. I'll let you learn the mimer on your own, but as it applies to your best friend in life, which is your spouse, if we can develop this concept, I accept my spouse totally. She has qualities, she has faults, but in terms of acceptance, I accept her and she knows I accept her as I accept myself. If that idea can be developed and be brought to the level of consciousness between a husband and wife, half of the issues that people fight over will be gone. The problem is we don't really accept, because the flaws and the faults and the word that was said yesterday and the action that was taken last week and that which happened 6 months ago still hovers as a black cloud over the relationship, and often one or the other, but for the context of this conversation we're men, that which the wife did then is a black cloud, and you don't accept her, and she knows you don't accept her. Oh yeah, you have good times also, but that lack of acceptance is a barrier of bonding and being one. And that needs to be overcome. Marriage means acceptance, total acceptance, without avoiding the recognition that there are flaws. Acceptance expresses itself as it translates as respect. The greatest characteristic that a wife needs from her husband is respect. Respecting the marriage and respecting her. What is there to respect? First and foremost, we accept that this relationship is unique, it is one of a kind, it is part of God's master plan that I and she should marry and be one. God wanted it from 40 days before the child is conceived. This was part of God's plan, and now it is realized. I need to revere that bond. Let's be honest. There are many women out there. Some of them are better, nicer, kinder, gentler, wiser, smarter, more pretty, more beautiful. What is it about this woman that she is mine?
Not one more than my wife.
Okay. What is about this woman that is your wife is that God planned her for you, and when you got married, you said, Harei at mikudeshes li, behold, thou art dedicated to me, and I am dedicated to you, to the exclusion of all others. And from here on after, we are one. That realization makes her the most special person in the world, as it makes you the most special person in the world to her. And never forget that. God should bless you with 12 kids, and with very successful businesses, and very happy and active social life. Never forget, and never let your spouse forget, that the most important relationship in your life is your spouse. She can spend 22 hours with the children, but you are the most important person to her. And if you forget that, and if she forgets that, and if you forget to find the right opportunities to show that, it does have an impact on the relationship. And it's a duty to show this to the children so that they know that they are not the center of the world, and they are not the center of the family, even though mothers and fathers dote over their children and raise their children, but you don't want to create little monsters. And one way not to create little monsters is, Daddy is first in my life, Mommy is first in my life, and you are our children. We're going to raise you with good values. That's what the children have to learn, and that's how you have to live. If it means taking the 3 days away from home and putting up with babysitters, and it's challenging and difficult, so that you can refresh your relationship from time to time, do that. It is a vital gift that you can give each other, and the kids know Daddy and Mommy care for each other. We are not the center of the world. We are a very important part of the world. They'll figure that out eventually, but it's good if they know it early on. All right. People are different temperamentally. Men and women are inherently different temperamentally. You married a woman, get to know her individual temperament and accommodate for that. Personally, I'm talking about myself. I don't like to talk about myself, but to make things clear, I personally am very hard on myself. I'm very demanding of myself, maybe too much of a perfectionist, but that's me. If I were to apply that standard to my wife, or to my children, or to my employees, woe is them and woe is me. For yourself, you can be as hard as you want to be. To others, you have to recognize who they are and what their needs are, even if they're your employees. And certainly, if they're your children or your wife, you need to treat them as they need to be treated. Men, this is something not necessarily from Torah, but I guess it must play. Probably it says so in Torah someplace too. Men are problem solvers. Women are much more into listening and talking and sharing feelings. And to men, if we would listen on to what women talk about, it wouldn't be a good idea. Don't listen to what women talk about. They're talking good, holy Jewish women, not speaking gossip, not speaking Lashon Hara. Is that what occupies them? Yep, that's women. But if you spoke to a woman like you speak to a man, you're going to have very little conversation. Men need to listen to their wives. Men need to not just hear what their wives are saying with their ears, but they need to listen with their mind and their heart. And you know what? That could be difficult. It doesn't necessarily come naturally, but let me tell you, you better learn how to do that. What are the worst 3 words a husband can say to his wife when she's talking to him?
What did you say?
No, this is worse than what you say. It is, are you finished? That's going to shut something down. What are the best 3 words a husband can possibly say to a wife?
I love you.
No.
I can't hear you.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Now, I have to attribute this little thing to Yaakov Smirnov, who has a degree in psychology, but he's a comedian. I heard this from him, and it resonated, and it's true. I'm going to share with you an anecdote that I heard from a local rabbi who's a friend of mine and of Steve's, who was talking to me about this class. And he told me a story that happened recently. This husband was driving with his wife in his car on Sunday. They went someplace, they came back. Sunday morning he was driving to work. He was 20 minutes from home. His wife calls him and says, did I leave my sunglasses on the passenger seat? And he looks on the passenger seat and he says, yeah, honey, you left it. Here it is right next to me. Can you bring it home? Are you nuts? It's going to take me 20 minutes to go back. It'll take me another 20 minutes at least to go back. I'm already late as it is. I'll bring it to you at home. I'll bring it to you tonight. You're not going to bring it to me? I need my sunglasses. They got into a nice knockdown, drag-out battle over the telephone. And this good rabbi said, you should have told her, you want me to bring it home? Sure. You know, I'm 20 minutes out, and it'll take me 20 minutes. It'll be 40, 45 minutes. But if this is what you want, I'll do it for you. He assumed, my friend the rabbi, that she would say, oh, no. Thank you for wanting to bring it home at night. I say it's a 50-50 chance that that's what she would have said. But I don't know the man, nor do I know the wife. But he was trying to bring out a point. And the point is, if you want to butt heads and lock horns, you can do that. Kinder and gentler will more often avoid the problem before it becomes a problem. Disregarding one's wife, ignoring one's wife, especially in public, is an indication that the marriage is seriously ill. I remember, I forgot the name of this. There's a famous marriage psychologist, I think in Seattle, wrote many books on marriage, and he said he can observe a couple, and in 7 minutes, he has a thriving practice of marriage counseling. He can observe them for 7 minutes without them knowing that he's observing them, and he can, with 90% accuracy, determine whether the marriage will survive or won't. And what he's looking for is the kind of respect or disrespect that exists between them. Where there is respect, there is a bond that can be built on. Where there is lack of respect and where there is the opposite of respect, that is often an indication that the bond that should be there is not there. Now, wives do silly things. They leave the car parked without quarters in the meter, or in our neighborhood, there are other ways to get tickets. Park under red. Cars get dented, and they say, I have no idea how the car got dented. Sometimes you can get into minor accidents and you say, thank God it wasn't more serious. But this is the third accident you had in 2 years. Okay. I had one accident in 10 years. So, does that mean that I'm perfect? Have I not gotten tickets? I don't tell her about my tickets, but I do. This is the way people are. She is not you and you are not her, and don't dump on her because she is not you. Again, another personal things. My sons, fortunately, I have a bunch of sons who are shluchim, and just 2 weeks ago, or was it there was the Shluchos Convention in New York, which means that for many of my sons, for a period of 4 or 5 days, they became Rabbi Mom. They were shluchim, and they were also taking care of families. Many little kids. It's not easy for a father to try to be a shliach, even if he doesn't have to be a shliach, just to take care of kids, which women do with more aplomb than men do. And one thing, and one of my sons wrote an article about that for his Dvar Torah, and my other sons copied it, how much they appreciate what their wives do, which they don't realize it on a regular basis. They forget it until next Shluchos Convention. Next time the wife goes away for a few days, they suddenly realize, well, don't forget it. Be conscious of it now, not wait for it to hit you in the face and you have no choice. My wife was just away in Israel for 2 weeks. I had to fend for myself. I didn't necessarily care to make myself a salad, so I made things simpler. When my wife and I go away on our periodic vacations, for whatever reason, it's beyond my understanding, my wife wants me to make breakfast. Not a big deal. One of the things we eat for breakfast is salad. Making salad for two can take 15 to 20 minutes. It's a whole process. I do it enthusiastically, much more enthusiastically than doing it for myself, because for some strange reason, this is very meaningful to her. And when she's away and I have to make it for myself, I either appreciate what she does when she's home, or I don't make it, and I say, I can't wait until she comes back. It's only salad that we're talking about. We're not talking about anything else. But these are these little things that make up what life is all about. There's a mitzvah, make your wife happy. That's a mitzvah in the Torah. One of the ways to make the wife happy is to let her know that you want to keep her happy. You need to tell her, I'm happy when you're happy. I don't mean you have to use these words, but you have to convey the idea that it is in your interest that she should be happy, and you will do what you can to keep her happy, to make her happy. You need to not only say it, you need to make her feel it. You know that famous little vort they say in the name of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe once told a husband who was, the conversation was something about folding the talis Motzoi Shabbos right after Shabbos is a segula for shalom bayis. And the Rebbe said something to the effect, folding the talis for a segula for shalom bayis? Washing the dishes for your wife once in a while, that's a segula for shalom bayis. I'm not advocating dishwashing, but there's a half a dozen or 27 different things that you can do once in a while or more than once in a while. Life is busy and people are different. If you regularly break the dishes when you wash the dishes, don't wash the dishes. But what it is that you can do that shows that you appreciate what she's doing and not ignoring it will add to shalom bayis. Now, we all go through this. We have a difficult day at work. You left the house at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 6 o'clock now you're exhausted, you're tired, you're frustrated, you're angry at some of your employers, your coworkers. The bills, the payments that were supposed to come in weren't paid, and therefore the bills that were supposed to go out didn't go out, or if they went out, and now it's getting very frustrating because if the check doesn't come in, you won't be able to cover the check. Oh boy, it's going to be a problem. And you're coming home now, and all you want to do is... Your wife, on the other hand, is taking care of 3 little kids. One of them has diarrhea. The other one has a cold. And she's at her wit's end right now, and she can't wait for you to walk in the door, and she can let you know how her day was. Did that ever happen to you? Either one or the other? Well, I will tell you some strategies that other people have used to cope with that. There is one person who I know who told me, when he goes home, cuts home from work, and he parks the car in front of the house, he doesn't step out of the car. Turns off the engine and pauses for a few minutes and says, okay, the day was as challenging as it was as difficult as it was, but that was. And now I am going to my real life. This is my wife and family are in this house. The baggage of today I'm leaving behind. Staying in the car, maybe at 9 o'clock at night I'll review what I can do about it for tomorrow, or I'll pick it up in the morning. But right now, for the next 2 hours, it is behind me. Takes a deep breath and walks to his door of his house with a smile. And there are wives who know that the husband is coming home soon, notwithstanding how difficult the day was. And we all know that days can be difficult for wives. Just as difficult, even if in a different way, than men's difficulties. But the wife makes it her business to pause, to look in the mirror and to see what she looks like, and to make sure she doesn't look like she looks as she sees herself right now, but gives herself 3 minutes to look differently. I'm not going to tell you how women transform themselves in 3 minutes, but you can do that, at least significantly. And when she hears the door opening, the key goes into the lock, she greets him and says, "Children, Tati is home. Let's say hello to Tati." What a greeting. If everybody can employ these tactics, it seems sometimes impossible, but it's not. We have to be honest that we are actually in charge of our moods. Unless you're clinically deficient, we do control our moods. I was once, as a human being, in a bad mood, and I was yelling at somebody, probably one of my kids, not my wife, heaven forfend. And then the bell rang, and I was expecting somebody, and I stopped what I was yelling about, went to the door, answered the door, dealt with the person at the door in a decent, civil, and proper manner, closed the door, and went back to my rant. Whatever I was in the middle of before, I took a 5-minute break from that rant and got right back into it. Boy, that was good. Now, the point of this is, I guess we can all relate to this. When somebody comes to the door, you got to act like a mensch. And then we let ourselves go and let the animal within us take over. We could be a mensch. If we want to be a mensch, we could be a mensch. So let's at least decide to be a mensch in our relationship with our spouse. That's a responsibility. It's not necessary. You may need exercises to learn how to do it, but it's doable and it should be done. The only one who can command respect is a king or a dictator. A husband needs to earn respect. He doesn't command it. He cannot show the line in Shulchan Aruch that says that the wife has to respect her husband, even if there is a Maimer Chazal to that effect. That's a theoretical Maimer Chazal. A husband needs to earn respect, and you need to earn respect every day. How do you earn respect? By good behavior, by caring behavior. Could that caring behavior be an act? It could be an act. All you have to do is act that way for 50 or 60 years. That will work. Now, the fact is, you don't really know how good another person is or how bad another person is. All you see is their behavior. But if there are people that, when called upon to react with kindness, and they are consistent week in, week out, year in, year out, of responding with kindness, you can assume that they are good and kind people. You build up respect by consistently acting caring, by consistently acting in a loving way. That's how you develop respect. You don't command it. There is a concept, again, in psychology, but it's worth considering because it makes a lot of sense and it really works. You know, I don't know if people have savings accounts in the bank anymore. But there was a time that people had savings accounts. I used to have a savings account when I was a kid, when I was 8. I opened my first savings account in the East New York Savings Bank. I put in $5 that I had earned, and I got a camera. That was my first, that was my bonus for opening an account, and I had a few $100s by the time I got to my bar mitzvah. I was a wealthy man. When you make deposits into a savings account, you can make withdrawals. If you don't make deposits, you can't make withdrawals. And except in a checking account. In a checking account, you can write checks even if there's no money in the account. But you know what happens when you write checks? When there's no money in the account, they bounce. In relationships, we're not perfect, and we're not going to be perfect, even if you listen to the video 10 times, and even if you go to therapy for 20 years. We're not perfect, and we're going to make mistakes in relationships and a relationship to our spouse. But there's an emotional savings account that we need to be constantly making deposits to. Kindness, compliments, gifts, appreciation, feedback, all those things that let your spouse know you care for her, though that's how you make deposits to the emotional savings account. Every once in a while, when you do something wrong or bad or inappropriate, or you didn't govern your mood and you snapped at her and you said something disrespectful, that's a withdrawal. If you have a good savings account, you can make a withdrawal and still be solvent. If you don't make too many deposits and you take a lot of withdrawals, you'll become insolvent and the marriage will become insolvent. When things are not going so well in your marriage, one important question to ask yourself is, what am I doing wrong? I had a guy in my office 2 days ago. I had to print out something for him on my computer. He came to my office at 9 o'clock in the morning. We were having a meeting, and then I had to print out the document, and it wasn't printing. So I had two choices. I could have taken my chair and hit the computer and say, "You dumb computer, why aren't you printing?" It wasn't going to be nice because he was going to think I'm nuts. So I didn't do that, but I went through all the steps. Check if the computer knows which printer it is. Is there paper stuck in the printer? I went through my very low-tech list of figuring out why the printer isn't printing. Couldn't figure it out. You know what the last resort is? Reboot, turn off the computer, turn it on again. Miracle happened, it printed. I'm using computers and printers as the analogy for relationships. Marriage is a give and take. Each gives and each takes. And if you give, you're appreciated. And if you're appreciated, the person wants to give back to you. And if the person doesn't want to give back to you, there's a lot of possibilities. It could be the person is broken. It could be that person is broken. It does happen. But before you write that person off, it would be wise to ask the question, what am I doing wrong? Am I pressing the right buttons? Did I check this? Did I check that? Maybe I'm doing something wrong in the way I am treating my spouse, so I'm not getting the right reaction. And sometimes you have to reboot. Sometimes rebooting means going on a little vacation. There's a letter from the Rebbe. I read this letter a lot of years ago in the Igris, but it surprised me. But then I asked myself, why am I surprised? It was a letter to somebody in Kfar Chabad. The daughter was married to somebody else, and they weren't getting along, and they were asking the Rebbe for advice. The Rebbe said a few things. First of all, he says, parents, stay out of it. Parents, it's not, you can't fix them. You might get an outsider to speak to them, but not you. Stay away from them. It won't work. And the Rebbe gave some other advice. And then finally the Rebbe says at the end, it could be all they need. And it was the first time I saw this expression in Hebrew, Yerach Devash Sheni. I said, Yerach Devash. Oh, that means a second honeymoon. I didn't know you can say that in Hebrew. But the Rebbe wrote it in a letter, and this was in the 1950s. So sometimes people need to just life can get so busy that you get estranged from each other. That's not good. Sometimes you need that. But the default position is, what am I doing wrong? That if you've gone, and you have to be honest with yourself, and after you've tried that and tried to reboot, and it still doesn't work, then you might need professional help, or whether it's advice from a rabbi or advice from a therapist or going, whatever. You got my point. There's a phrase, I don't think the Friedrich Rebbe wrote it, but he documented it. Ehoiv es habikoires ki hi ta'amidcho al goiva hanochi, which means, love critique, because that will raise you to the high level. Critique works. To be critiqued works when you know that the person critiquing you has your best interest at heart, and they want to help. If they're out to get you, you won't listen. A relationship is blessed when a husband and wife can critique each other with love and respect, and each one can take the critique positively. Do people really want a spouse that is sycophantic? If that word is too challenging, it means obsequious. It means a person who is a yes man. Do you want your wife always to agree with you? Yes, husband, yes, husband. That's no fun. It's fun for 3 days. It's not going to be fun for 30 years. You want a partner with a backbone who has a mind, has feelings, has an opinion, has good values, and you can share your values and have her disagree with you. And you can talk it through. You don't have to fight it out. You can talk it through. And you can get a third opinion. That's how kind, caring, loving people work things out. Think back. For some of you, it's a few months. For some of you, it's a few years. For some of you, it's a few decades. Think back when you courted your spouse. You did everything possible to make her feel that you care for her. You wanted to get her. You got her. Well, you need to continue 30, 40, 50 years later. You need to continue the same pattern. The same way you got her, that's the same way you will keep her. By making her feel that you want to get her, that you appreciate her, and now that you've been married to her for 10 or 30 years, you appreciate her even more. And finally, I want to say something. This part is the most negative thing that I will say tonight. Let me begin with a silly joke. This is a joke you should not say in front of women because they don't appreciate it. I don't know if you're going to appreciate it either, but there's a point to the joke. This couple came to the lawyer and they said, we want to get divorced. The lawyer looked at them. They were quite elderly. But he was a professional. He took out his yellow pad, name, address. Sir, how old are you? 96. Madam, how old are you? 92. If you don't mind my asking, when did the problems in your marriage begin? 6, 7, 8 years after we got married. Why did you wait so long? The husband says, we were waiting for the children to die. Okay, it wasn't a good joke. Why am I telling you this story? Why is there like different people laugh differently in different times? Why do some people laugh immediately? Some people take 10 seconds. What are they digesting? What are they... anyway, that's a discussion for another time. I had a conversation last week with a woman who I know from the time she was a little girl. She's married to a man who I know from the time he was a little boy. They're married for over 35 years. They married off all their children. And on the surface, they have a nice marriage. They have a very tumultuous, rocky, fighting marriage. I was aware of it because I'm close to them over the years. But she laid it all out. They're going to remain married for the rest of their lives. But what a pity that they didn't fix this early on so they can enjoy their marriage and enjoy each other and enjoy their family. Can they still change? Where there's life, there's hope. But if they would have fixed it in the first few years, they wouldn't be where they are today. I have good friends who got divorced after 35 and 40 years. When we were little kids, when we were in camp, don't do this at home. They used to have, probably, I don't know what the name, metal spoons and forks they would have, but when we were in camp, we would bend them, and bend them back, and bend them again, and see how many times you can bend them until they actually snap. If you tried it at home, your mother would snap something, and it would be you. But anyway, in camp, they were cheap stuff anyway, but we can get away with it. Metal can bend once, and back and forth, and it will snap. Marriages can also be bent only so much until you sort of write your partner off and you cohabit in one home. I don't care if that cohabitation includes the entire structure of marriage, but it leaves out the soul and the relationship. What a disaster. It's not as so much that it's bad as it is such a waste of a life. Why waste a life where you can have a meaningful life? It's so I say to those of you who are young and see some areas of strain, I hope some things that were said so far and that will be said next week will help smooth out some of these things. Don't let things go as they are with problems. Fix them now where you're younger, you're not completely set in your ways. Fix them now while you can, and you will, to use the fairy tale ending. It doesn't have to be a fairy tale. Im tirtzu ein zu agada. You can live happily ever after. Okay.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Do you have to wait
until it's big problems to go on a second honeymoon, or do you recommend it, every year, every couple of years?
I recommend it as preventative maintenance.
Okay.
You have to do your, I don't know if you do tune-ups anymore or whatever. Change your oil, do your tune-ups.
Once a year.
I recommend it. And I had 11 children. The oldest was, at a certain point, the oldest was 14 and the youngest were babies. And I made it my practice to go away for 2 nights and 3 days, twice a year.
Wow.
It didn't happen every year, but it happened most years. As challenging and as difficult as that was, with my responsibilities and my then wife's responsibilities, I wouldn't call it a second honeymoon. I was just, sometimes weeks would go by that we barely had time to talk to each other. And go away for 2-3 days, you can talk to each other, you can relate to it. It's a different gestalt. Yeah, I think it's a good idea and a healthy idea for everybody.
I'm newly married.
Mazel tov.
He knows because he was at the wedding. You mentioned second honeymoon. How about the first honeymoon? Like, in other words, we got married about 3 weeks ago. So we had the Shabbat Bracha week. But, like, I guess what I'm saying is that something you see as critical as having to happen? Or, because we actually read in a book, it was a book that was, I think it was like a Chabad guide to weddings, and it said something, there was a short part on honeymoons, and it said actually the Rebbe didn't recommend honeymoons necessarily, or it was just a very short sentence, and then it was on to the next
I don't know
topic.
what that sentence was. First of all, the classic honeymoon doesn't apply to a Jewish marriage because of the various laws of Nida that has to do with the first relationship, even if it's a young marriage or a middle-aged marriage. So that gets in the way of your standard honeymoon. It really depends on the relationship. This is just a personal feeling. I don't think a honeymoon is critical right after the marriage. I think it would be good for people to plan to spend some time away from their regular hustle bustle of life, whether it's 3 months later or 6 months later or 9 months later, whatever fits for your family.
And it doesn't have to be very far, just something where you're getting away.
Right. And I remember reading a joke. This guy was on a plane coming back from Hawaii, and he's talking to him, he's sitting next to this guy, and he's talking to him and says, he's talking about, we're coming back from Hawaii. What were you doing in Hawaii? We were celebrating our honeymoon. Where's your wife? She's over there in the other aisle, four rows back. Well, why aren't you sitting next to her? Oh, we just spent a full week together. It's okay. Anyway, keep going. Next question. Yeah.
What did you, your partner in your side, like someone to be with you all the time? Even at work.
I would say that that's more in the category of a problem rather than a question. What I mean by that is, for the wife to want to be by the husband's side, or for the husband to want to be by the wife's side all the time, is a kind of dependence which is not healthy. So one needs to try to figure out why that type of dependence and make the partner more independent so that it doesn't get in the way of each person needs to breathe, must have breathing room. That seems to not allow for that. Yeah.
Quick question. Okay, how can we make the wife, just a little, like you said, take vacation, but then she's worried about the kids all the time, and she's not willing to do that. She's not willing to leave the kids and go, and how would you deal with that?
Well, I don't know. Again, each individual case is different. First of all, I would do everything in my power to set things up in a secure way that she has nothing to worry, that the kids will be just fine. And if all that effort doesn't work, one might think maybe she doesn't want to spend time with me away. Why would that be? And that could be an interesting topic for consideration. As I said before, when things are not working, you have to ask, what am I doing wrong? I don't know to what extent it may or may not apply to your question.
No, but the problem is not that, because she always wants to go with me, she always, so that's not, but the kids, she said, they have this thing, they have that thing, I have to worry about this, I have to worry about that.
Help set up that those things, hire 3 people to take her place for the 3 or 5 or 7 days so that everything is taken care of, and then get some Valium so she doesn't worry, and then take her away. All right, yeah.
Thank you.
With regard to loving critique, I was wondering, or I had heard, that maybe that applies more to a man than to a woman. That I once heard it's not good to critique your wife. Never critique. I even heard it said never to critique your wife,
Yeah.
criticize your wife.
I don't know that I agree with that. You know, well, you know the famous line, when your wife asks you, do I look fat in this dress? That is one to avoid. However, it depends how it's. There's a Maimer Chazal, Kol ahavo she'ein imo teichocho eino ahavo. Love that is not balanced with rebuke is not love. If you care for the person, you will guide them, criticize them for their own good. But remember what I said before. It is very important that the person feels secure, that you have their best interest in your heart. Then it doesn't hurt. If criticism hurts, it means that there's a flaw in the way the criticism is coming out. As I mentioned from the Tzemach Tzedek, when a person criticizes himself, and there's no one who can criticize oneself as one can criticize himself, you know what? It doesn't hurt. It hurts in the sense, yeah, and now I'm going to have to lose 10 pounds, or now I'm going to have to learn to behave differently in certain ways. That hurts. But the fact that you're telling yourself, I need a change, that doesn't hurt because you accept yourself. If that type of total acceptance comes across, it won't hurt. So that if it isn't there, then I would say don't criticize your spouse, don't criticize your friend. If they don't feel total acceptance, it's not the right, healthy kind of criticism.
I think the Friedrich never says it in the book of Ahavas Yisrael that when you have to commend someone, make sure you practice Ahavas Yisrael. And how did you know that? It was by the acceptance of the other person. If the other person doesn't accept it, the person given the same measurement to be. If you don't practice Ahavas Yisrael, then the result will.
The Friedrich Rebbe writes, and that's what we're referring to, I'm just adding one line. Before you criticize someone, make sure your nails are trimmed and your fingers are clean. He's talking figuratively. Before you criticize somebody else, make sure you're not going to scratch them, you're not going to hurt them. And then there's, the Friedrich Rebbe said to Rabbi Gordon from the Valley's father that Farbrengen, which an ideal Hasidic Farbrengen is group therapy, group criticism. He said it's like a schwitz. Now, I don't know, the classic schwitz is you go in and you sit down on the bottom step and you get warmed up. Then you walk up a higher step, you get warmed up even more. Then you get to the top step, and then the the bedder. The bedder is the masseuse. But in those days, it wasn't the masseuse. They would have made out of different greenery. They would hit you on the back. I don't know exactly how it worked. I never experienced that. But that was, so he says, the first thing in a Farbrengen is you got to warm the people up. You got to care for them. You got to feel them that you love them. Then when they're really warmed up, then you can take the whatever that is and give them a patch. But don't meet them out in the street and hit them with a lulav. That's not going to work. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rabbi Schusterman.
Go ahead.
All right. Good.
You're on the email list? Make sure on the email list.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam kol yisrael v'yisrael na'am ha'olam asher b'asar. Baruch ha'olam.
What's next week's class?
How to keep the flame alive.
What you said today, huh?
What? That's it. How to keep the flame alive.
Who's in the square?